In a move that has many, including members of his own party, flummoxed, President Trump has ordered the withdrawal of U.S. troops from war-torn northern Syria. That is a shift from former foreign policy, which leaves U.S.-supported Kurds open to an invasion by Turkey. The Kurds have, of course, been a strategic partner with the U.S. and have helped to combat ISIS in the region.
But the president is resolute, yesterday saying U.S. forces were only supposed to be in Syria for 30 days, yet our military became more entrenched with, quote, no aim in sight. Still, some fully support the president's move, saying the previous administration backed the wrong side. The president retweeted Michael Doran yesterday. Doran said, in part, we were aligned under Obama, not with the Kurds, but with the PKK, the sworn enemy of the Turkish Republic, our ally. We were sowing the seeds of a Turkish PKK war with that policy. Went on to say the policy drove Turkey towards Russia. Joining us now is Michael Doran himself. He previously served in the Bush administration as senior director in the National Security Council, also a senior fellow with the Hudson Institute, where I'm also a media fellow. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Mike, you're out on a limb here. You're one of the few people who is supporting the president's or appearing to support the president's move. Just explain why you think that it's not a betrayal of Kurdish allies. That is essentially what the main Republican argument has been about this decision.
Well, for two reasons. First of all, Turkey is our ally, and Turkey's been it's a NATO ally. And when the Syrian civil war erupted, we decided to solve our problem in Syria without taking into consideration our ally. We aligned with, as I said there, the PKK. Yeah. That is the Kurdish forces on the ground that we aligned with are the Syrian offshoot of the PKK, which these are Turkish, Kurdish separatists who want to break apart Turkey. From moment one, the Turks said, please don't do this, and we told them to sit down and shut up. Right. It was inevitable that we were going to get to this position.
So take us back to that time, because it feels like a long time ago, but it's easy to forget at that time ISIS was on the rise. They had established the caliphate. Fighters were leaving from the U.S., leaving from Britain to go join them. They were beheading people. They were, setting people on fire on cages. There was this sense America's got to do something. The President Obama at the time was roundly criticized for drawing a red line and then failing to follow through. What were the options at the time? Because as you're saying, you're making the argument this was sort of inevitable from how this was set up at the beginning. Right. What should we have done instead at that time? There
are two major decisions that we made This is back between 2011 and 2014. 2014 is when the siege of Kobani took place. I don't know if you remember ISIS surrounded the Kurdish town of Kobani, and that's when 2014 is when we made a marriage with the PKK. So the two decisions that were crucial was the first, the Obama administration, when it realized it had to get involved in Syria, looked for partners that would not irritate the Iranians or the Syrian government.
Because of the Iran deal at the time.
Because of the Iran nuclear deal, and because Obama in general, all across the region, was aligning with Iran. He didn't want to do anything that was going to upset the Iran nuclear deal, and didn't want to get on the wrong side of Iran regionally. The only player in the game who fit that bill was the PKK, and that's why we aligned with the PKK. So everyone else in the game, including the Turks, including all of anyone else on the ground in Syria, wanted to fight the Assad regime and ISIS. Yes. And we did not. We made anyone who took training from us. We made them sign a declaration that they wouldn't use any of our equipment to fight the Assad regime, because that was absolutely our red line. And so, because they were the only player in town, we ended up choosing the sworn enemy of the Turks. And the PKK is a designated terrorist organization, designated by the State Department, by the United States. We played this terminological game and said, no, it's the YPG. It's the PYD, it's the SDF, it's the PKK.
So, Mike, the converse of this, I'll play the devil's advocate. Brett McGurk had a large, he was the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria, said yesterday, he said, look, our only options were we either put 10,000 U.S. troops alongside the Turks in order to do something about this, or we had to arm the PKK. Now, is that a false choice that Brett McGurk
Totally a false choice. First of all, let's remember who Brett McGurk is. Brett McGurk is the guy who personally put billions of dollars on pallets to send them to the Iranians, right? He is the guy who was the architect, or one of the architects, of the policy in Iraq of aligning with the PMU in Iraq. Those are the Iranian
militias,
trained, equipped, and led militias. It's the same policy. It's the same policy in Iraq. The policy that said the fight against ISIS is all that matters, nothing else matters, and Iran, they never said it publicly, but their behavior shows that this is what they thought. Iran is our ally against ISIS. At least not our ally. We can come into an alignment with them. That was the policy that handed Iraq to Iran, and that is the policy that he wanted to follow in Syria. Look what he's saying now. McGurk wrote an article in Foreign Affairs just a few months ago in which he said, what's the answer in Syria? Instead of Trump doing what he's doing, what he should be doing is brokering a deal between our allies, the PKK, the PYD,
yes,
and the Assad regime. That is exactly what he did in Iraq.
But again, to play the converse here, I mean, many people say we should not be withdrawing from Syria because it empowers Iran. And as somebody who you want to confront Iran, I mean, isn't withdrawal of troops exactly doing that?
No, but the troops that we have in place on the ground in Syria, the number is very small. There's special forces who are empowering the PYD, which, by the way, is the ally of the Iranians, historically, of the Iranians and the Russians. That's that's who we chose to work with all along. We have not been fighting the Iranians on the ground. Once we get out, whatever, it's very hard to know. There are multiple players here, all making decisions in relation to what we do.
Yeah.
Once the dust settles, we can then work on a strategy to dismantle or to disrupt the Iranian networks. But look, this policy that McGurk and others are pushing, we're talking about a land bridge now from Baghdad to Beirut. One end of the bridge is in Baghdad. McGurk put that in place. The other is in Beirut. They did nothing. Nobody has done anything about Hezbollah from the beginning here. We basically aligned with Hezbollah in this fight in Syria, or did nothing to disrupt it. So there are many places you can go after the land bridge other than in the Syrian desert.
But here's the other piece. You don't like the decision at the beginning to ally with this group, but we did, right? We made a deal with them. We said, you're our allies, and they did help us in the fight against ISIS. And today they're holding something like 10,000 ISIS prisoners of war. So, you know, you may not have liked that decision at the beginning, but that's what we did. So number one, isn't it dishonorable to turn our back on people that we did ally with, that we did make a deal with, who held up their end of their deal? And number two, isn't it dangerous now that we don't know what's going to happen to those ISIS prisoners who are currently being held by the Kurds?
No, absolutely not. The second point is a better point than the first one. The temporary, tactical, and transactional relationship that we entered into with the PKK was completely understood from the beginning by them, and they benefited from it enormously. They got training,
a lot of weapons.
They got weapons, training, equipment, money, and diplomatic support from the United States. The United States kept the Turks at bay, defeated all of their enemies.
I don't think part of the deal was we're going to stand back and tell Turkey you got the go-ahead to go in and crush these people.
We didn't say that.
I don't think that was part of the deal.
We didn't give Turkey the go-ahead. The president didn't at all.
We're parsing. The president did give authorization for a limited Turkish military.
But he said yesterday that if they go forward, that they will be sanctioned.
He's cleaning that up now, but that was the original message from the White House.
This group wants to detach the Kurdish parts of Turkey from Turkey. If there's an American role here in precipitating a conflict between the Kurds of Syria and the Turks, it was the decision to align with this separatist organization to begin with. And another point.
The ISIS prisoners.
Can I make one other point about this? We are encouraging them by the support that we give them in their maximalist position. They don't simply want, they want an autonomous area in Syria, and they want absolute exclusive control over it. They don't want to share.
By the way, I mean, not to go way too far back in history, but it's something that we have supported in the past: a state for the Kurds, the Iraqi and the Syrian and the Turkish Kurds.
No, I mean, in the past, pre-World War I. But in international politics, that's ancient history. Back in World War I, we haven't.
Not to them.
We haven't in recent time.
Not to them.
And we support Kurdish autonomy in Iraq.
Yeah.
And the group that we're supporting, we're not against the Kurds. We are not supporting the Kurds in Syria. We are supporting the PKK. The PKK has horrible relations with Barzani, for example, in Iraqi Kurdistan. Erdogan of Turkey has good relations with Barzani.
So what's going to happen to those ISIS prisoners now?
Last answer.
There's no good answer to that.
Yeah.
No good answer at all. But it's quite hypocritical of the Europeans, for example, to say, we're not going to help you. We're not going to send forces to northern Syria, but we want you Americans to stay there. And oh, by the way, you have to keep those prisoners.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to the 4 million Syrian refugees in Turkey?
Right.
None of these questions are easy.
Not easy.
These Europeans have largely suffered the worst of these terrorist attacks, so they should be doing quite a bit about it. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mike. Good to have you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.